Welcome to the first session of the final day of the Film Forum Conference, of the 28th Film Forum Conference. Here I am having the pleasure to chair this session again with Ivan PINTOR and Chiara GRIZZAFFI, with whose contribution you already you have just seen, and I will say that their contribution, their talk, will give us the opportunity, provide us with a further opportunity to discuss even more explicitly than we have done some of the topics that have been discussed at length during the whole conference. And of course, this panel we were expecting and in a way hoping for something like this, but this panel it's the one devoted in the economy of the World Conference to address the elephant in the room. That is the starting condition that we even not explicitly, but we were something we were thinking about whenever we started thinking and considering of devoting this edition of the conference to the issue of mobility. It wasn't so clear at first because it has drawn on a very different set of problems and issues quite related to the historical and cultural issues of the media and film production. So mobility was taught in quite different terms, but in this case we soon realized that the immobility and the captivity condition that we have just experienced because of the pandemic was one of the main factors why we chose this topic, or at least why this topic seems so well fitting on several directions. So I'm particularly grateful for bringing this not so hidden dimension out there and expliciting this underlying dimension on all our discussion, and we will have the chance to go back to some of the topic we have just discussed with other panelists in a more explicit manner. Let me first introduce the speaker. I apologize for this kind of self-referenced introduction, but let me first introduce Ivan. And both Ivan and Chiara are actually long-time collaborator of and friend of the Udine University and of the Film Forum itself. Ivan holds a PhD in communication study from the Universidad Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, whereby he's now a senior lecturer and a member of the Cinema research groups. He currently teaches contemporary cinema in the bachelor's program in audiovisual communication at the University Pompeu Fabra in Barcelona, and cinema, television, and comic book history in the master in contemporary film and audiovisual studies program at the same institution. With Jordi Balló, he is the principal investigator of a research project, Visual Motifs in the Public Sphere, Production and Circulation of Images of Power in Spain from 2011-2017, and he is also the project manager in Spain of the Erasmus Project Teseo, Arianna, Strands in the Digital Age. His line of research are gestures in film, iconology and iconography, hermeneutics and criticism in film, comparative film studies, television series, sequential narrative, transmedia, and intertextuality. Chiara GRIZZAFFI, on her hand, is a postdoctoral fellow at the Ulm University in Milan, where she obtained her PhD in 2015. Her book on video essays, Il film attraverso il film, dal testo introvabile al video essay, has been published in 2017 by Mimesis. Her essays have been published also in journals such as Bianco e Nero, Imago, Cinergie, The Cinephiles, and in books like Writing About Screen Media, which was edited by Lisa Patti and Aaron Farocchi, Pensare con gli occhi, edited by Luisella Farinotti and Barbara Grespi and Federica Villa, and Crito Films, Cinema che pensa il cinema, edited by Adriano Apra. She is also a co-editor of Intercision and an associate editor of the journal Cinergia. So, after having introduced you, I would like to have the chance to discuss something quoting directly from your contribution and from the written presentations of your contribution, because well, let's start. I mean, let's follow the order of the presentation, and let's start with Ivan's presentation, if Chiara doesn't mind. I mean, even something you say about the, I'm trying to quote quite literally about one of your research questions in this talk was how do the confined dance of TikTok, the circulation of big data, or the mapping of movement re-articulate the connection between the history of cinema, the history of visual capture device, and the anthropological dimension of everyday life, which is actually a quite ambitious research question, but also a really crucial one. And it seems you underlined the opposition, like some sort of counterpoint between cinema and what we might call digital devices, or what we can call new media devices, and some sort of new media aesthetics in addressing what you call an hyper-localization and phenomenology and iconology, of course, of hyper-localization on the one hand, and the ongoing or the ever-changing but always reoccurring topos of mobility as a condition, as something that have been in a way associated to the moving images, moving in a double sense in this occasion since the very beginning. Let me just move here an objection and some sort of provocation that you probably already thought about while researching on this subject. It could be also true, and I'm obviously reflecting on this in a retrospective manner, posteriori, but it could be also considered true that cinema has always been some sort, at least it has always been, the movie image in general, always been fascinated with the situation of captivity. It's not in strictly visual terms, at least in narrative terms. So the most usual association, I'm not so convinced about it, or it seems like over simplistic. The most usual association is the one by the GIF with the images circulating in the new media, which reproduce the same movement from one character over and over, so as still images and a character moving over the same time, which is often associated to the aesthetic of the frame of the pre-cinema and of early cinema. But it's not something that I found so convincing. What I think is interesting to re-articulate the history with the sense that we may now have of the digital aesthetic, to re-articulate the history of the world moving images, we can encounter several cases of cinema being involved in some sort of magic trick. I mean, the idea of unleashing someone from a very fixed set, the idea of just depriving the character of any possible way out from a different situation is something that have been reoccurring several times, and it seems to me like it is some kind of residual of the time when cinema was closely interconnected to the magic tricks, fair attraction, and so on. So do you think that this awareness that we now have of the situation of captivity could also foster other historiographical paths? Is that in some way related to what you are looking for while reflecting on the contemporary images and on the counterpoint offered by documentary cinema and outer cinema?
Thank you very much, Simone, because this is a great question, and obviously very difficult for me to answer as broad as the question I did in the paper, no, in the presentation. But I absolutely agree with you in this question that obviously when we are thinking of the lockdown, of the captivity, confinement, of the figure, of the body, we very easily can think about Méliès, about the early cinema, the pioneers, in which there were a deep connection with theater on one hand, and maybe on the other hand with comic books, like Little Nemo's comic books and all these pioneers of comic book, in which maybe it was very difficult to shoot in some places, and it was easy when you wanted to not just to tell a story, but also to make these tricks that you said, to remain in a closed space. And obviously the question that for me is interesting is that from the pioneers there's a connection with modern cinema, in which, for example, all the classic cinema, all the classic Hollywood is more related with a romantic way of discovering new places, of this impulse to know another places, and to somehow externalize the gaze in another guy that is shooting something for you at the end, no? But what is very interesting is that after the 60s in particular, I think, when the camera rediscovers the space in a way that is problematic, losing sometimes the characters in the city or in the spaces between the cities, discovers again this basic situation of our lives, that is the lockdown and the relationship between body, gestures, and reactions with the most immediate space without connection with the outside world. And I'm thinking not just in some examples that I propose in the presentation, but also, for example, in the films for TV of Samuel Beckett, in which we see always, for example, figures in obviously a theater box going round and round like rats at the end, no? That is more or less the situation that we have had in these 2 last years. And this is for me very interesting, because I think that obviously, as you said, cinema has always had a discourse, something to say about our relation with the space. When cinema appeared, our relation with our natural relation with the space changed a lot, because our gaze could be in another way, not just obviously photographically with the still images, but also in this movement way. So for me, the main thing is that we can think about our contemporary situation in terms not just of audiovisual, but also in terms of cinema. Even I'm thinking about the many things that Chiara has studied a lot, no? But not just in terms of traditional cinema, but for example, the reflections of in last years of some visual essays and cinema essays of Chloé Galibert, Or, for example, Stefan Curious, which I think about the says about migration of Stefan Curious when seeing the last part, Chiara, of your presentation, that seemed to me fascinating, absolutely fascinating. This is a way of cinema to think about our situation, in which I think there are many other things that are interfering, like, for example, big data and all these questions apart. But this connection between primitive cinema, modern cinema, and obviously right now contemporary cinema, for me is like a triple gesture of approaching the situation of lockdown from cinema.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. The focus on gesture is something that come really to the foreground while listening to your contribution, and it's definitely one of the defining traits of a new iconography of confinement. And so yes, that was another point that I actually wanted to stress. And well, I will also say that what I found really moving to Chiara's contribution, what I found really interesting, and what I think you, Chiara, are really well aware of, is the whole socially and economically constructed nature of the production of these images with the GoPro. I mean, you have been following, if I understood correctly, you have been following the evolution and the history of this technology, also in terms of promotional campaign, also in terms of the imaginary that surrounds it, and also of the social economic condition that are in a way interrelated with the needs of the capitalist society for mobility of subjects and mobility of things, of course. And so having a great network of circulating, something that the pandemic situation kind of arrested, and at the same time made more evident than it has ever been. And I'm intrigued by particularly by the last part, in the sense of your contribution, a sort of missed occasion for an ecological let me be precise with the term, what you actually say. The missed opportunity for a new ecological mobilography, being mobilography the primary theoretical point of reference for your begins definition of mobilography, or for your paper. So and you give some example about how this ecological mobilography will look like, or could look like. And my question in this case is and I'm here thinking, I guess, also of Luca Caminati's keynote speech yesterday, which in a way in his co-edited collection kind of, and even in the keynote yesterday, kind of pondered on this relation between exploration and exploitation, an exploratory look which also exploits. And so isn't the actual social and economic system surrounding the birth of the action cameras, but we can talk about several other digital or non-digital device, and this emphasis and these challenges, maybe this initiative that elicit the moving on a moment of crisis? Isn't this whole context which in a way prevent from the developing of an actual ecological mobilography, or maybe risks in conveying ecological mobilography and the use of this action camera to depict the environment and stress some ecological issues in a different discourse, in a discourse that, in a way, instead of reflecting on what is missing from the capitalist system, is just once again responding to the capitalism. I'm sorry, I've been totally unclear, but maybe you can you can take something from my question. I'm still thinking about it, so please help me out.
So do I. Indeed, this presentation, of course, you know that I was working on action camera for a while now, and my original project was actually to study GoPro amateur users communities, the Italian ones, and to see how they relate with the device and study the discourses they do about using GoPro cameras to see if there are some continuities within with the amateur device history and tradition, as well as discontinuities due to the digital turn. And in a way, I thought my research was over. I mean, I had already written something about this. I thought, okay, this research is over. I encountered the two books I mentioned in my presentation, the one by Rodolphe Christine about Turismo di massa e usura del mondo, and the other one, The Selfie of the World by Marco Deramo, and they invited me to think about this, the issue of tourism and its ecological impact. And then at some point, the pandemic hit, and I was still following these GoPro amateurs communities online, and I started to see how they were, you know, using the device in this completely, this peculiar and you know, unforeseen situation. So it suggested me that there was something else I should have considered, you know, about this, about action cameras in general. And the film I mentioned in the end of my presentation, The Purple Sea, was also mentioned by Francesco Zucconi in his presentation, and I followed the discussion, and the issue that came out at some point was this idea of profanation. I mentioned Giuseppina Sapio's essay on GoPro cameras, but of course profanation is an idea she takes from Agamben. She's quoting Agamben and his idea of profanation. And the interesting thing is that the Home Pro challenge demonstrates in a way something that Agamben says quite clearly in his essay, that the capitalism essentially works appropriating, you know, and this kind of profanatory behaviors, and so in a way erasing their profanatory potential. Of course, Agamben also mentioned tourism in his essay as, you know, this, the very the quintessential example of the quintessential ritual of a capitalist religion. So in a way that there are, you know, many point of contacts with my paper and this whole idea of profanation. And the interesting thing is that Purple Sea works in a completely different way from this channel. So if challenge, sorry. So if the Home Pro challenge loses its profanatory and subversive potential due to the appropriation of this strategy by the company itself, Purple Sea does the opposite. The camera is used precisely for the purpose, sorry, for which it's built. we have someone who has to travel, you know, to cross the sea and uses the camera in the same way that tourists do. But the thing is that the action cameras are embodied devices, are connected to the body. And so actually the subversive, the profanatory device there is the body, because her body is the body of someone who is not allowed to travel, who is not allowed to circulate, who carries, you know, documents that doesn't allow her to cross borders to go to Germany. So in a way, that was the thing that hit me about this film, and that you know, made me think about this aspect of action cameras. They are indeed as I say in my presentation, the tool that perfectly, you know, serves the purpose of this mobility within capitalist society, as you know, that is what Agamben says. So basically, like this very depressing somehow experience of going around and experiencing the impossibility of profanation. For him, the museum is like the museum, or touristic sites are precisely this. So places in which you cannot profanate anything. You are deprived of this subversive potential, you know. So in a way, the film was for me, even though it's shot before the pandemic, was for me an answer, at least in respect to the issue of mobility. In regard to the, more generally, in regard to the possibility of an ecology of mobilography, or an ecology in general of image production, I think it is an issue that it's very much central nowadays, even for media and film theory. There are so many very interesting studies that scholars are doing about a materialist approach to image production. That is an approach that underlines and stresses out the means of production and the means of distribution of images and their economic, social, ecological impact as well. So and for me, it's a kind of a relatively new field of exploration, but indeed, I think it's it's really central nowadays to think about this. The thing is that I'm not sure. The thing is that if we think about what Roger Audin says about amateur images, and the fact that with digital technologies, this images production is somehow intended to fulfill the desire for an eternal memory and an external one that we, you know, assigned to these clouds, to this system that seems somehow to exist, you know, beyond ourselves, and to have this kind of eternal potential. And if this is really what these images are about, this desire to fulfill our need for eternity, our need to have this powerful total memory that can also last forever, how can you deal with that? How can you somehow think of an ecological approach to this? Of course, it's possible to do that. They're definitely studying and putting forward all these hidden aspects of images production, including, you know, the condition I mentioned before, is a way, but but yeah, I don't know. This paper also, the part of this paper is also connected to a very pessimistic vision I have nowadays about the pandemic and its possibility to, you know, change the way we think about the world, the way in which capitalist economy is working. I mean, I totally agree with what Ivan says. Rather than changing things, this pandemic has accelerated some processes that were already ongoing, and in a way, I'm not sure we are still in time to you know, halt this kind of rush towards not eternity, but its opposite, maybe, as you know, also Luca Caminati has in a way reminded us about this yesterday. So.
Yeah, there are so many reflections that you are eliciting right now with your answer to my question. So maybe sometime unclear question, just elicit a more productive answer. But let me first ask.
Unclear, I know.
But it's okay. It's a work in progress in a way. let me ask to the audience and to the people attending our panel if they have any question. They can easily raise their own hands, and they will be invited to join the panel with their, and could ask the question with their own voice, or at least they can write the question down anytime in the Q&A box in the bar below. So please don't be shy and contribute to the discussion. If there's any question yet, I would like to move a little bit the discussion on the methods and on your reference, because while associated by several points of context and connection, your two contribution are in way diverge on what the focus is. In Ivan's case is about iconographies, and it's about, let me say, aesthetics, and more which of course validates the comparison between some kind of cinema, some kind of films, and an imagery which is instead more insistently promoted by the TikTok challenges, once again, and the digital circulation of images, while Chiara explicitly mentioned the social use and the social construction, the social life of the technical object themselves. So how this technical object adapt not just to the social and economic context that we have discussed, but also in a more detailed way and a closer way on how they adapt to the request of the user and the general changes in the might occur, and something they have to do in order. So the focus are alternatively was on the images as they have been produced from different media and different contexts, and also addressing maybe the same things, representing the same thing. And in Chiara's case, it is a focus on how technology evolved and adapt itself to different social situations. So do you think any of your ongoing research besides this single contribution could benefit of the other panelists' perspective? I mean, and more precisely even, do you see any differences in the social use of the different media you have examined, and how on the social status, let me say so, for cinema, the cinema you have been exploring, and the other media and the digital production of images? And conversely, Chiara, can you see anything that you can in a way relate to the new a new, or at least a changing iconography and aesthetics of the action camera, despite their the way that are actually used in society. This as this process of a readapting process generated, in your opinion, different aesthetics of the action camera. So
we can follow the order. Oh, okay.
Please, Chiara.
Okay, should I go first? When I watched Ivan video the first time, I think there are some, of course, his approach is really interesting, and it would be very useful also to, I mean, I think that Purple Sea, in a way, is a case study that perfectly fits, you know, your approach. More than mine, and it's a completely different object from the amateur produced images. So it would fit really well an approach like yours. And the other thing, of course, there are some aesthetic changes in the way in which amateurs use their cameras. I mean, confronting myself with amateur produced images, in a certain sense, it was, I wasn't really interested in assessing their production from an aesthetic, formal perspective, but there's something that should be considered as well. And also because there are maybe I have to I still have to watch a little more of these videos made during the pandemic, but obviously, for example, I mentioned the drone images that are made with GoPros or other action cameras, and the most obvious answer would be precisely this desire to show this deserted landscape, to make this kind of very pensive and suggestive videos about unpolluted landscapes, empty cities. So this is probably the most evident shift within this kind of production, even though, of course, drone images made with action cameras were also made before. They were kind of different. The ones on the boats, of the crowded beaches, there are images that were, you know, produced before and after the lockdowns. About combining these two approaches, I don't want to suggest, I mean, even how to answer his question, but I was kind of thinking about this as well when I watched this video, and about, for example, TikTok videos, and how somehow they summarize the contradictory status and nature of media. On the one hand, you know, TikTok videos are tools for challenging traditional institutions and traditional authorities. I'm thinking, for example, of the use of these devices in contexts such as schools. I know that for personal experience, unfortunately, but yeah, students use that a lot in schools. And if we think about the amateur film tradition, you had amateurs shooting in schools, and they were usually, you know, the teacher, the parent, not the child, not the students. So in a way, they use this kind of technology also to challenge traditional authorities. The issue is that they submit themselves, often without knowing, to kind of different power structures. and to different disciplining structure. What you say about the way in which the framing, the composition of this video suggests this precisely this kind of disciplining gaze they are somehow unaware of. That's very interesting and very it was a very useful suggestion for my research as well. So again, integrating your approach to my studies would be really, really, you know, useful. But yeah, there is always this ambiguity in the use of this kind of technologies because this aesthetic of confinement was somehow quite present in amateur videos since I think the introduction of camcorders and these amateur devices that were made for individual use and for that were also, you know, cheaper and used not just by the paterfamilias, by the father or the mother or the adults in the family, but by the children as well, who can use them. And the aesthetic of the room is kind of very common in these videos, at least again, since the introduction of camcorders or the first digital devices. And this kind, the room was a sort of room of their own, so a safe space, a space in which they could express themselves and escape the surveilling gaze of the parents. Again, the issue is that nowadays in this, you know, continuous flow and transmission and diffusion of images for the reasons and purposes I've said before, I've mentioned before, they are somehow submitting themselves again to a different kind of surveilling and perhaps not surveilling, because it's not what they do, that it's as long as they do that. I mean, I don't know if my answer was clear, probably, again, very confused, but...
It's okay, it's just like my questions, but it's a good entry point for even at this point.
Yeah, no, for me, it was really, really fascinating to listen to you, Chiara, because I think your presentation was plenty of ideas that made me rethink some of the issues that I commented. And obviously, there's a question, this is a very interesting question for me, and as some specific thing that you said about the obviously the change that GoPro images experimented during lockdown, in which people were shooting the way they were cooking or something at home. This profanation, no, of the usual use of the GoPro. This is fascinating. The possibility of profanation of a device that is nothing sacred, no, but it's something very, very a non-object, like Byung-Chul Han says, no, something that is just a device. But this was fascinating, and this idea you talk about the Giorgio Agamben profanazione, but I just was thinking also about another of his books, that is Infancia Historia, in which he I'm sure you remember, he talks about these dialectics between game, play, and ritual, no? This idea of the ritual constructing time and the game destructing time. And this overlapping of the two things in the GoPro device and many other things also in TikTok, for me, is quite fascinating, because it's a kind of circulation, no? That obviously makes me understand very well your pessimistic way of assisting the development of society now. And obviously this idea that Marie-José Monsen has explained very well, in which she says in her books that every image has economic an economic base in his development. No, this question of every image is goes with economy. That for me is very interesting, because when I was listening to you, I was thinking about a couple of things. One is a question that I have for you, because I don't know, I have not thought about that, and it would be very nice and super interesting to have your opinion about that. And the other is, well, the other is just a question about the specific device. No, I start with the second one, and then I make the question. The second one is, when you were showing Purple Sea, I was thinking also about this other film about migration that is Spectres Hunting Europe. I don't know if you know, is from Niki Janari and Maria Kurkota. It's a very fascinating film, because these two, one of them is a filmmaker and the other he's a poet. She's a poet, and they go to Lesbos and they shoot migrants. First of all, with a typical digital camera, in which they don't dare to go among the migrants, between them, just shooting long shots from a very important distance in a very Chantal Akerman way. No? And at the end of the film, they decide to give voice to the migrants, but not real voice in the sense of language, but they choose another kind of device that is an analogic camera, a 16mm camera, and they go in front of every one of the migrants there in Lesbos and shoot just a portrait of them. Is very, for me, it's very fascinating that the digital typical device for shooting films right now only allows them to get at a distance, then choose the analogic camera to get in front of them. And I was thinking about that when you showed Purple Sea, because at the end the GoPro shows the underwater perspective of a shipwreck. No, that is something terrible. And these three different devices for three different situations related with the same phenomena, for me, is something that have made me explode my mind, because it's something very interesting. No, and in this sense, I had a question or something to talk with you and with Simone, obviously, that is when thinking about the GoPro device, like an extension of the body, I was thinking also of the police camera, security camera Axon, or any vision or Axon, that the two devices for American police and other police. Which would seem you is the relationship, as far as you were talking about surveillance in the last moment of your talk right now, the relationship between the GoPro used in this way that you have explained, and not just the GoPro, but the Axon security system, for example, in the police body. It's something that for me, I have no clear idea, but I think it's quite interesting, this idea.
Yeah, indeed. No. I absolutely agree. First of all, thank you for the suggestion about the other film. The thing you said about the three different devices and the three different point of views is really fascinating, and I absolutely had to watch the film. By the way, I admit I included Purple Sea in my presentation by chance, because I found out it was on Movie right when after submitting my abstract, which is somehow different from the actual presentation I submitted for the conference, and I watched it and I thought, okay, even though it's not exactly my field, I have to address this in my presentation, this kind of different use of the camera in the film. And what you said now about the police cameras is indeed something I thought about yesterday. you know, still thinking about this, all the suggestions that I've received from the conference in general, the other presentations, your video as well. And I don't really have an answer at the moment, but what is clear to me, and it's connected to what I said before, is that the issue of the body, and how this, a film like Purple Sea demonstrates that, you know, on the one hand, this promise of the augmented body is a promise for a precise kind of body, you know, the white body, very often the male body. They are allowed to be, you know, the heroes of the GoPro Hero camera. But we forget when thinking about action cameras, but it's indeed something that we should put at the center of our reflection instead, is that we talk about gender bodies. There are bodies, white bodies and people of color bodies, and such devices demonstrates in a way that even when we use the cameras in the same way, so not in a subversive way, but precisely for the uses they are intended and built for, your body makes a difference. If I am a black woman, you know, going around and filming, I will film different interactions from, you know, the ones that will be filmed by a white woman. So yeah, in a way that's absolutely what it demonstrates, this idea of the fact that meaning that something is of course connected to a body means also that we should take into consideration what bodies are we talking about and how they change. And in a way, as I said before, they can even work as a device, as a means for profanation, you know, using the camera for the right purpose, but indeed using that as someone who has a precise, you know, identity is another way of profaning, perhaps, you know, a dispositif.
This is quite interesting. If I can comment one thing, Simone, thank you. Is when working in our project about the iconographies of the public sphere, I detected a situation that I imagine that in Italy, for example, was the same. That was this situation. People during lockdown going around the streets, not legally, no, with a GoPro. They shoot that, and then people from the windows of the neighborhood shooting him with cellular phones to denounce the guy with the GoPro. And then there was a third question in this situation, that was police getting there, and all the people in the windows doing this ugly thing that was like shooting to the police, saying punish him, punish this guy. We obviously didn't found the images from the police, the security cameras of the police, but the idea was very crazy, you know. Every one of the three elements were shooting with different kind of devices, and obviously it makes me think that every issue of our contemporary life is related with the idea of taking an image. That is something that, for example, Ariela Sulay always says, no? This idea of the photographic act or the videographic act as the key question of the social pact of people of our civilization. For me, it's something very, very interesting, no? Because at the end, the people with no rights to appear or taking images are people excluded, or even the idea of, for example, that migrant people is always appearing for us in a police camera image or with a very low pixel definition? No, this is a very important question for me, and so it was fascinating when you talk about that for me. Yeah.
Paradoxes of mutual surveillance becomes quite clear whenever you are confined at home and you see who is going to see somebody else and who is going to be seen from somebody else. And there's no even a strict distinction anymore. I mean, as you said, everyone is entitled to produce the image, and then maybe the excluded is really the one who's just the subject of the image and not the producer of the image. So I think one of the most notable outcome of this intriguing discussion was mentioning at length and discussing at length the pandemic and addressing at length the work of Giorgio Agamben without even mentioning the opinion of Giorgio Agamben on the pandemic itself. So we did a great job in that. Yeah. And I would like to thank all the people that are that have been attending and our discussion, and of course both Ivan and Chiara for contributing so wholeheartedly to an ongoing discussion, actually something that we have been discussing from several perspectives for all this conference. And before closing our panel, let me remind you that in half an hour we will have another panel, and this time we will move the agenda on archival knowledge, liminality, and nation building, so different ideas of identity. The panel is entitled History on the Move. It will be chaired by our colleagues and friend Rossella Catanese in half an hour at this link that I'm writing down in the chat. So I will be glad to see you all you have attended, and also you, Chiara and Ivan there, and I will thank them once again for their contribution to our conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.